At Christmas dinner, my grandfather slid 3 plain white envelopes across the table and said, "A little Christmas gift for each of you." The sound of silverware stopped all at once. My parents burst into those loud, overacted laughs they use whenever something feels awkward. Because real guilt can't talk, but fake laughter can. "It's just his holiday tradition," my mom said, rolling her eyes so hard it looked like a reflex. Dad joined in, like teasing Grandpa with some family sport they'd trained for. I didn't join them. I just smiled, slipped my envelope into my coat pocket, and stayed quiet. To them, he was playing another one of his harmless old man pranks. But the next morning, when the banker called and said, "Your deposit has gone through, Ms. Hale," my stomach dropped. That was the moment I realized he hadn't been joking at all. And before I explain how that one cleared check twisted everything between us beyond repair, tell me where you're listening from, so I know I'm not the only one who's ever watched love turned hollow over something that was never about money in the first place. My name is Amelia Hale, and that night wasn't the first time I'd watched my family laugh at things that actually mattered. My parents, Victor and Elaine, built their whole identities around appearing perfect. Charity brunches, perfectly staged photos in front of cars they upgraded every 2 years, speeches about how hard they worked for their comfortable life. What they never admitted was that a good portion of their success came from my grandfather, Edmund Hale, the man they performed admiration for but privately resented. Grandpa wasn't just wealthy, he was steady, the old-fashioned kind of wealthy. Land, investments, quiet returns, the kind of money that never needs attention. He'd built every bit of it himself and still wore the same scuffed leather watch he'd had since before I was born. He valued discipline, modesty, and the power of not filling every silence. Maybe that's why he'd always had more patience for me than for them. I didn't take without giving. I didn't ask for shortcuts. I lived alone in a tiny Portland apartment and freelanced as an interior designer from my dining table. No team, no assistant, just me and my laptop. My parents treated that like a flaw. In public, they called it humble. In private, they called it wasting my potential. They said I'd be running a firm by now if I'd just network. By network, they meant marry well or charm investors, not rely on actual ability. When Grandpa invited us for Christmas dinner that year, I accepted because I missed him. They accepted because they sensed opportunity. I could tell by the way Mom kept checking her lipstick in the mirror and Dad practiced his cheerful voice like a script. With them, everything was strategy. The dining room smelled of pine branches and roasted duck. Crystal glasses gleamed under soft light, and the plates had gold trim. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, straight-backed, eyes sharper than anyone gave him credit for. We made small talk, weather, work, the usual empty noise, until he reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 matching envelopes. "A small Christmas gift," he said quietly. Mom let out a short laugh, brittle and performative. "Oh, Dad, are we doing those pretend checks again? That's adorable." Dad followed her lead. "You always make the holidays interesting." I wanted to sink into the floor. Grandpa didn't react. His expression didn't shift. He just looked at them for a long second, then turned to me. I felt my face warm under his gaze. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't need to. I just said, "Thank you," and tucked it into my coat pocket. No one else noticed the faint change in his face, the small flicker behind his eyes. They kept talking, bragging, filling the space with their noise, but I caught the way his fingers lingered near his water glass, the slow blink, the almost hidden sigh. He'd expected their reaction, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. When we said goodbye later, he hugged me longer than usual and whispered, "Keep it safe." I nodded, not yet understanding what he meant. The drive home was quiet except for the windshield wipers scraping through the snow. Mom finally spoke. "You seriously kept that thing?" She twisted around in her seat, staring at me like I was the foolish one. "You know he does this every year. It's just his little performance." Dad was already scrolling through his phone when he added, "He just likes testing us, seeing who still bows to him. Makes him feel important." I looked out the window at the streetlights blurring in the snow. Or maybe he wants to see who still respects him, I said softly. Mom sighed dramatically. Sweetheart, you can't keep taking everything so literally. My apartment felt colder than usual when I got home. The radiator rattled and the faint smell of roasted duck clung to my coat. I hung it over a chair, pulled out the envelope, and turned it in my hands. Grandpa's handwriting was neat and steady, the strokes deliberate. I hadn't opened it at the table because it felt wrong. He'd handed it to us like something meant to be valued, not mocked. So I sat on my bed, tore the flap open gently, and slid out a real check. 5 zeros. The ink was fresh. The signature was crisp. For a long moment, all I could do was stare. Then I placed the check back in the envelope and tucked it into a small wooden box, the one where I keep things that matter. Old receipts from my first paid job, letters, a photo of Grandpa and me sanding a wooden table when I was 12. I didn't intend to cash it. I didn't intend anything, really. I just couldn't treat it like some prop in a joke. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Zoe, my friend and coworker. How was the fancy family dinner? I texted back. Predictable. They laughed. I didn't. Zoe sent a voice memo. Honey, you're the only one in that household who has basic respect. Stay strong. I smiled, set my phone down, and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling in my chest. Grandpa's last words, keep it safe, kept nudging at me. So, out of curiosity rather than expectation, I deposited the check through my banking app. Maybe he meant it symbolically. Maybe he didn't expect anyone to cash it. I didn't think about it again. Hours later, while sketching a living room layout for a client, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? A polite, steady voice answered. Good afternoon, Miss Hale. Calling to inform you that your deposit has gone through, Ms. Hale. I froze. Cleared. I opened my banking app. The amount was sitting there, perfectly processed, exactly as written. My heart stuttered. If mine cleared, what about theirs? Before I could even process it, my phone rang again. Mom. Her voice came out sharp, brittle, strained, the voice she uses when she's furious but trying not to sound like it. Did you talk to your grandfather today? No. Why? Because something is wrong with the checks. The bank said ours were declined. They said... She lowered her voice like she was afraid to hear herself say it. They said yours went through. I said nothing. The silence seemed to inflame her. Did you call him? Did you convince him to change something? No, Mom, I just deposited it. Well, clearly he's choosing favorites again, she snapped. He's punishing us for being successful, for moving forward with our lives. I wanted to tell her the truth. He wasn't punishing them for success. He was punishing them for the way they laughed at him. But I didn't. I just listened as she tried to twist the story into whatever made her feel less guilty. Later that day, my dad called. His voice was colder. Your mother's upset? You could have told us you deposited it. It was a gift. I said, that's what you do with gifts. Don't be smart with me, Amelia. He's old. He doesn't know what he's doing anymore. Old. That word lingered like a slap. That evening, Grandpa called me. His voice was calm, steady, nothing like theirs. Did the bank contact you, sweetheart? Yes, I said. They said it cleared. Good. A pause. I could hear the crackle of his fireplace on the other end. Don't worry about your parents. Some lessons take longer to learn. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. The next morning, the group family chat exploded. Mom's long messages full of blame and confusion. Dad threatening to straighten things out, but Grandpa said nothing. Instead, an invitation arrived in the mail 2 days later. His handwriting again. Dinner. Same house. Saturday, 7 p.m. No explanation, no note. Just a time and a place. Zoe called when she heard. You think he's going to call them out? I looked at the neat black ink on the card. I think he already has. That Saturday, I stood in front of Grandpa's house again, snow crunching under my boots, heart steady. This time, I wasn't the quiet one waiting for permission to belong. I was the only one who'd passed the test. Grandpa's house looked exactly the same as it had a week earlier. Warm light spilling from the windows, wreaths on every door, a quiet hum of a fireplace inside. But the air was different, tighter. I could feel it before I even knocked. When I stepped into the dining room, the table was set the same way. 3 place settings, same gold-rimmed plates, same silver serving tray polished to a mirror. Except this time, the air between us was heavy. Mom sat stiffly, arms crossed, a smile glued on like cracked porcelain. Dad scrolled his phone but kept glancing toward the hallway, waiting for Grandpa to appear. The sound of slow footsteps made both of them look up. Grandpa entered calm and deliberate, carrying a thin stack of papers. He didn't greet us. He didn't even look angry, just resolved. "I won't keep you long," he said, placing the papers on the table. "You'll each find your names there. Bank statements printed this morning." Mom blinked fast. "Dad, this isn't funny. You humiliated us. The teller said you stopped our checks." He nodded once. "I did." Silence. "Why?" Dad demanded. "If this was some kind of test, it's cruel." Grandpa looked at me, then back at them. "Cruel would be letting you keep thinking respect is optional." Mom's voice wavered. "We didn't mean anything by it. We were just joking." "Joking?" he cut in. "When you laughed at a gift I offered, you laughed at me. You laughed at the years that built it." She swallowed hard. "We thought—" "Exactly," he said. "You thought. She," he nodded toward me, "felt." The room went silent again. The fireplace popped in the corner, and for a moment, it was the only sound. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Dad pushed back in his chair. "This isn't fair. You know we've supported you too. You're overreacting." Grandpa raised an eyebrow. "Supported me? You've taken my money and called it independence. You've built an image, not a life." Mom burst out crying. Then the kind of cry that isn't sadness, it's fear. "You can't just cut us off like this." He leaned back in his chair. "I already have." Dad's face flushed. "You'll regret this." Grandpa's tone softened just slightly. "No, son. I regret raising a man who values appearance over honesty." He turned toward me. "Amelia." My heart jumped. "Yes, Grandpa." He pushed one of the folders toward me. "This is yours. I've transferred full control of the trust and properties to your name. Daniel will guide you through the paperwork." Mom's head snapped up. "What?" He didn't flinch. "You both still have your homes, your jobs, your lives. What you've lost is my belief that you understood what family means." Dad stood up, gripping the back of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. "You're rewarding her for doing nothing?" Grandpa finally raised his voice sharp, cutting, like thunder, breaking through calm. "She did everything. She listened. She respected. She didn't laugh." The echo of his words filled the room. No one dared breathe. Then quietly he said the same line that would end everything good. "Now I know who's real." It landed like a verdict, final, unarguable. Mom slumped in her chair. Dad looked away, his anger deflating into something smaller, or a shame. Maybe. I sat still, unable to move, my heart pounding with a mix of grief and clarity. After a long silence, Grandpa stood. "Dinner's in the oven. You're welcome to stay and eat if you can still sit at this table honestly." He left the room. Mom started gathering her purse. Dad muttered something about unbelievable manipulation and stormed out. The front door slammed. The house went quiet again. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock marking time. I looked around at the untouched plates, the soft light glinting off the silver. It felt surreal. Grandpa came back a few minutes later, carrying 2 bowls of soup. He sat one in front of me and sat across the table, the seat that had always been his. We ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the wind outside. Finally, he spoke. "You didn't cash it for the money, did you?" I shook my head. "No, I just didn't want to disrespect you." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's what I thought. You see, Amelia, I don't care who has money. I care who has manners." He leaned back, watching the fire. "People show you who they are when they think they're above gratitude." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "You didn't have to do this to prove a point." "I didn't do it to prove a point," he said. "I did it to protect what's left of decency in this family." We finished our meal in quiet understanding. Before I left, he handed me another envelope, this one unsealed. Inside was a single note written in his neat, old-fashioned hand. "Money changes hands every day. Respect only once." I tucked it into my coat pocket. Outside, snow had started again, falling in soft, slow spirals. As I stepped off his porch, I looked back through the window. He was still at the table, the fire reflecting off his glasses, looking peaceful, like a man who had finally done what he had to. I drove home without turning on the radio. The world outside was quiet, and for the first time in years, so was I. A week later, I sat across from Daniel Kerr, Grandpa's lawyer, in a quiet downtown office that smelled faintly of paper and cedar polish. He explained the transfer details carefully, sliding a few trust records across the desk. I barely looked at the numbers. They didn't matter. "Mr. Hale asked me to make sure you understand this isn't a reward," Daniel said gently. "It's a responsibility." I nodded. He already taught me that. Outside, through the frosted window, the city moved as if nothing had changed. But everything had. My parents hadn't called since that night. Mom sent one short text. "Hope you're happy." I didn't answer. There wasn't anything left to say. When I went to visit Grandpa again, he was in his study, reading by the fire. The light caught the edges of his glasses when he looked up. "I hope they're okay," I said. "They will be," he replied. "Sometimes truth has to sting before it heals." We didn't talk about the money. We talked about my work, my next project, his garden plans for spring. It felt like breathing again. Before I left, he said one last thing softly, almost to himself. "A check is just paper, Amelia, until you decide what it's worth." I drove home in the fading light, his words looping in my head. The snow had melted on the streets, but something inside me had settled solid and calm, like respect, finally finding its rightful place. They thought the check was fake, but the only thing fake that night was their love. I didn't win anything. I just stopped losing myself trying to earn their approval. Now, every time I pass the bank on my way to work, I think about that moment, the call, the silence, the truth that finally landed. Some lessons don't come wrapped in gifts. They come disguised as heartbreak, and they stay with you longer than money ever could. If you've ever learned what respect really costs, share this story and tell me, what would you have done?